Hey guys, welcome back to Geared Forwards. My name's Paul, and today we're taking a look at a veritable legend of the multi-tool world, the Leatherman Wave. Now, just a quick aside, the quote-unquote normal version of the Wave now is the Wave Plus. The only difference between this version and that version is the Wave Plus has replaceable cutters, this one doesn't. Everything else is the same, so just a very minor change, and everything else should still apply. So let's start off with a quick look at the tool set. Now, the Wave does have a very usable design in the fact that it has a lot of outside accessible tools and then the standard butterfly. So let's start off with the pliers. Here we have a somewhat needle nose design with our cutters in the middle. And on the Wave Plus, as I've mentioned, those are replaceable. As these ones are not, I tend not to rely on them too heavily, and instead I use my rebar, which are replaceable. And then whilst we have it open, we can see here, straighten that up, that in the inside of the handle frame, we do have rulers in both inches and centimeters. So if you lie this flat, you can actually take a measurement of something, which I like. I like when you get more out of space that exists anyway by just putting a little bit of ruler on there. It's not unsightly and it can actually be helpful. Over in this handle, we do have a pair of scissors that are quite compact. And for what they are, they're not bad. You have a decent jaw length. This flattened pad makes using them actually very comfortable. They're not as good as Victorinox scissors in my opinion, and just the general ergonomics of using them can be a little bit funky with the angle and the fat handle, but overall they're a pretty solid pair of scissors that I've got quite a lot of use out of and can't complain. Now all of these tools do lock with this tab mechanism, so just depress that to bring it back in. And then in the rest of this handle we have, there we go, a flathead slash kind of prying surface, just a screwdriver there. And then we have an eyeglass screwdriver bit holder here, which again, all these lock in place. So if you remove that, you can see that we have a flathead on one side and a very small Phillips on the other. And these are the kind of bits that you would use for tightening up your glasses or perhaps some electronic screws, things of that nature. Coming on over to the other handle, we have our main bit driver. Now this uses the Leatherman 2D bits. So here we have a flathead on one side, Phillips on the other. It's nice that you get the choice of both. I highly recommend getting some accessories if you're going to get a Wave. Excuse me. Having this bit holder is very nice, but ultimately if you're not going to augment it with some bits, it's kind of So the bit kit is very useful, as is the bit extender, preferably the ratcheting adapter if you can get your hands on it, although availability is a little bit difficult nowadays. These bits work fine enough. The steel is a bit softer. They tend to chew up quite easily, but I've done quite a bit of DIY with them and they've always served me quite well. You can actually get, with the handles displayed like this, you can actually get quite a lot of torque on a Leatherman driver. And surprisingly enough, even though it feels a little worrying, you do eventually get quite a lot of flex feeling in the handle as you're really torquing down. I've not deformed any handles and I've put quite a bit of force on them, so it works surprisingly well. Of course, a dedicated screwdriver is always best, but sometimes you use what you have. And finally, inside the handles, we have the Leatherman combo tool. So this is a combination bottle opener, and as you can see from this bevel, a can opener. And then we also have a nice sharpened wire stripper. So whereas on a Victorinox you might have to rely on just either shear force or using the main blade to score it, this can score and pull off that wire sheath on its own, and it works very well. I'm actually a big fan of this as a singular tool. I think it works very well, and I really like this wire stripper. Now to the external tools. Now we have a little bit of a sold notation. So we have two knives, and as you can see, this one has a little bit of jimping, whereas this one doesn't, and that is to identify that this is your straight edge. A little bit of a clip point blade. I believe this is 440C, and it's a capable blade. The Charge is basically an upmarket version of the Wave where you get a bit better blade steel. Ergonomics are okay. We have a liner lock that holds it nice in place. You get a nice sharp tip so you can do some fine work. You have a little bit of belly, not a lot. All in all, this is done just fine for me, like processing boxes and whatnot whilst doing some DIY and IT work. And then as this jimping might tray, we have a serrated blade over here. Very good for just tearing through cord and whatnot. This is only serrated on one side. We have a bit of a chisel ground serration here. Not really a fan of chisel grinds, but in this case it works just fine, and we do have a nice straight edge portion up here that works quite well as well. And in addition to that, we have a wood saw, and you can either use this little notch in here to pull it out, or I tend to just put a little bit of pressure up here and just pull it out that way. Now the saw isn't the longest, and it is quite thin, so it can feel a little bit flimsy. However, that thinness does mean that it also has to cut less material to get through, so this will actually get through wood, PVC and whatnot a little bit faster potentially than others. One second, I do have a Victorinox saw to compare to just whilst we're on the topic. So as you can see, even though the Wave is a much larger all-around tool, in terms of actual saw edge, they're about the same, with the Victorinox perhaps having a slight edge. And the Victorinox is actually, despite again being the much thinner tool, they're roughly the same in terms of thickness as well. The saw and the rebar and super tool, that kind of thing, are much stouter. In terms of actually using, I do prefer this, although I don't use a saw that much. For my limited use, I do prefer this style. On to perhaps probably my most favorite part of the Wave is this fantastic file. So we have a crosscut file here, and then on here we have a bit of a metal saw. Yeah. And then my favorite portion here, we have a diamond file. Now, this combination of crosscut and diamond file is excellent. I wish it was on more multi-tools. Having a finer option for a file is very nice for finishing up some cuts, and I just really like having access to it. And I have used this metal saw a few times for cutting off the points of nails and whatnot. Mostly when making like duct tape holders and things like that. And it cuts through very well. It's actually quite ergonomic. This is a boxy piece of metal. Using it over any great deal of time, particularly without gloves, is not going to be great. But it does get the job done, and it's an excellent file overall. So let's move on to some size comparisons. We'll start off with our mainstays of a 91mm Swiss Army knife and a 58mm. So as you can see, it's a little bit longer, and most definitely it is a chunky boy, and being all stainless steel, this is quite heavy. But a more relevant comparison for Leatherman fans might be this. So we have a Skeletal CX and a Leatherman rebar. And just while we're here, we'll give a little bit of a blade and a plier comparison as well. And of course, in any Leatherman video, my primary struggle is not pinching myself in the handles, which is inevitable at some point. So as you can see, in terms of sharpened blade length, the Wave is easily winning out here with the most capable knife. And outside of the CX, it's also the easiest to open and most ergonomic, especially compared to the rebar. In terms of buying something for a pocket knife, I do still advocate the CX, but this is a very capable blade. And the rebar does have a similar tab locking system that it also uses for its knife. In terms of pliers, you can see that the Wave actually goes for the most needle nose of them all, with the rebar being slightly thicker, slightly more blunted at the tip, and the relatively stubby pliers on the skull tool most definitely being, they're not snub nose pliers really, but in comparison they most definitely are. These are all capable pliers for what you would use a multi-tool for, but I do find that for fine work the needle nose of the Wave is actually very suitable. Moving on to some final thoughts and criticisms. One thing to note is that the Wave is a little bit of a metal brick. I personally carry this in a leather sheath along with a torch and i3T, a bit extender and bit kit, and you can find that video up here. That works well for me. Otherwise, you have no real way of conveniently carrying this without putting it in a pouch or dumping it in a pocket as standard. There is a hidden lanyard loop on this, which I will cover in a short soon. Otherwise, they do sell an optional lanyard loop and pocket clip that functions by inserting into here and being retained by the tab lock mechanism. I like the inventiveness of the removable pocket clip, but at the end of the day, I really think, especially for how expensive these are nowadays, and that it's just a bent piece of just pressed steel, I would really prefer that they were included in the box instead of trying to microtransaction us with basic functionality. I prefer pouch carry for a multi-tool personally, so that's not a big deal for me, but I do think they should include it in the box. I also think that price-wise, this is getting a little bit expensive for what you get nowadays. In the UK, you're looking at around £100+ for a Leatherman Wave. I know that you can get them cheaper in the US, and there's a much more flourishing second-hand market in the US, and there is something to be said for Leatherman's 25-year warranty. But at the same time, nowadays, with the breadth of the competition, not just in terms of Chinese clone, but original designs, Victorinox, Spirit multi-tools becoming modernized with pocket clips and one-hand open blades, I really think that, you know, a little bit more could be done on the Wave front to bring it into the modern era. The price isn't going to go down, it's just not the way Leatherman prices work. But I do still think this is a solid multi-tool overall, and with the Arc now out and at the forefront, I don't think that we'll really see much changes to the Wave. So to conclude, I think that my cat is currently complaining and that this is still a solid multi-tool that I can still recommend, especially if you get the bit kit. But there are definitely other multi-tools you may want to consider, and if you've got that money, you may want to push for an Arc. But that's all I have for you this time. If you like this video, please make sure to hit that like button. Leave your thoughts about the Leatherman Wave down in the comments section down below. And if you'd like to support the channel, please consider becoming a channel member or supporting on the Patreon. Until next time, I've been Paul, and I'll see you, yes, you, in the next video.